Welcome to each of our nominees and to your family members who are joining us here today. And we want to thank all of you for your previous public service and your willingness to serve in this very important role. The D.C. Superior Court, which operates as the state-level trial court in the nation's capital, has one of the highest per capita rates of cases filed. According to the National Center for State Courts, 83,000 new cases are filed across its 5 divisions each and every year. Yet unfortunately, the D.C. Superior Court is suffering from extensive judicial vacancies that have placed serious burdens on every division, increased the workloads for current judges, and delayed resolutions for the parties before the court. I'm pleased to have 3 exceptionally well-qualified nominees to the Superior Court here with us today, each with a long-standing commitment to public service and commendable legal abilities and professionalism. If confirmed, each of you will decide matters that impact the freedom, the livelihoods, and families of many of the individuals who come before you. Today's hearing is an important opportunity for the committee to learn more about your qualifications and how you plan to serve in these new roles. With that, Ranking Member Portman, you are now recognized for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the 3 nominees for being here today and your willingness to step forward. We're considering you as nominees for Associate Justices to the D.C. Superior Court. Each of you have spent part of your career already in public service. If confirmed, you will be doing something very important, which is to serve the people of D.C., but also get the backlog down and deal with a public safety crisis, I would say, in the district. Like a lot of large cities, D.C. is experiencing a crime surge. There have been over 200 more armed robberies this year than last year at this time. There have also been more homicides this year than there were at the same time last year. Part of this is something happening nationally, but I think part of it is exacerbated by the backlog here in D.C. At the beginning of this year, there were more than 10,000 criminal cases pending. That's more than double the number from 2020, as an example. COVID clearly played a part in that, and I appreciate the fact that the court system is trying to help reduce the spread of COVID. But I also appreciate that they've now resumed in-person proceedings, which should help alleviate that backlog. If the nominees are confirmed, you will be responsible for ensuring timely justice, which is important, obviously, to the victims and to defendants. And again, I think it's part of improving public safety in D.C. So I look forward to talking to you about that during this process. Rising crime in D.C. and the case backload are just 2 of the important reasons why we need impartial and qualified judges on the D.C. Superior Court. I look forward to hearing from all 3 of you today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Portman. It is the practice of this committee to swear in witnesses, so if each of you would please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony that you will give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? You may be seated. We will now have a video from Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, who will introduce our nominees.
Leaders and Ranking Member Portman, I appreciate the opportunity to introduce Kendra Briggs, Errol Arthur, and Carl Ross to be Associate Judges on the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. All 3 would bring experience and credentials to be excellent judges. Ms. Briggs has spent the last 10 years in the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, including serving now as Senior Assistant U.S. Attorney. She currently works in the Public Corruption and Civil Rights section, where she prosecutes civil rights offenses in federal court. She previously prosecuted cases in the D.C. Superior Court, ranging from simple misdemeanors to homicides. In 2020, Ms. Briggs received the U.S. Attorney's Award for exceptional performance as an assistant U.S. attorney, and she has received several U.S. Attorneys Awards for special achievement. Prior to her work as an assistant U.S. attorney, Ms. Briggs was an attorney at Shook, Hardy and Bacon LLP, where she specialized in civil litigation. Ms. Briggs received her law degree cum laude from the University of Miami School of Law. She clerked for Florida Supreme Court Justice Peggy Quince. Judge Errol Arthur has served as a magistrate in the D.C. Superior Court since 2010. Judge Arthur has presided over a wide range of bench trials during his tenure, including neglect and abuse cases, and has held arraignments and detention hearings in both juvenile and adult cases. Judge Arthur served as a staff attorney for the Public Defender Service for the District of Columbia, serving from 1999 until he opened his own law practice in 2002. Judge Arthur was appointed chair of the District of Columbia Board of Elections and Ethics in 2008. He has served as an adjunct professor and supervising attorney for the Howard University School of Law's Criminal Justice Clinic, and has been a visiting faculty member for Harvard Law School's Trial Advocacy Workshop. Judge Arthur received his law degree from Howard University School of Law. He clerked for Judge Mary Gooden Terrell in the D.C. Superior Court. Carl Ezekiel Ross serves as counsel to the House Committee on Ethics. He previously served as an assistant U.S. attorney in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia. He handled more than 100 federal appellate and district court matters. He has also served as a litigation associate with Arnold and Porter. Mr. Ross received his law degree from William and Mary Law School. Mr. Ross clerked for Judge James Spencer of the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia. I very much appreciate that the committee is moving these nominees. Unfortunately, we have a perpetual vacancy crisis in the local D.C. courts, regardless of which party controls the Senate. To address this crisis, I have introduced the District of Columbia Court Vacancy Act. This bill would expedite the appointment of local D.C. judges by applying the 30-day congressional review process for D.C. Council-passed legislation to the appointment of local D.C. judges. The House Committee on Oversight and Reform passed this bill in December. I have urged the committee to consider similar legislation. I appreciate the committee's moving these nominees, and I look forward to working with you to end the vacancy crisis. Thank you very much.
Well, I'd like to once again welcome our three witnesses here today, Ms. Briggs, Judge Arthur, and Mr. Ross. Ms. Briggs, you may now proceed with your opening remarks.
Good morning and thank you. Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Portman, and members of this committee, I am honored by the opportunity to appear before you today as a nominee to be an Associate Judge of the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. I am deeply grateful to you and your dedicated committee staff for considering my nomination. I would like to take a moment to thank the District of Columbia Judicial Nomination Commission, chaired by the Honorable Emmett G. Sullivan, for recommending me to the White House, and I am thankful to President Joseph R. Biden for nominating me to this position. I also want to thank Congresswoman Norton for her introduction this morning. I must also thank the current U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Matthew Graves, and former U.S. Attorneys Ronald Machin, Vincent Cohen, Jesse Liu, and Channing Phillips for their support and guidance throughout my career as a prosecutor and throughout this process. I must also acknowledge my current and former colleagues at the United States Attorney's Office, whose dedication to public service and the citizens of the District of Columbia have made it an honor to serve alongside them for the last 12 years. I am the eldest of 4 daughters born to Lindsay Davis and Patricia Moss Davis in Miami, Florida. Affectionately known as the K-Girls, my sister Kia is a dedicated and decorated high school teacher, and my sister Kishar is an outstanding attorney, and my baby sister Kanisha was unfortunately only with us for a year before she passed away. My parents' hard work and many sacrifices served as a roadmap for our professional pursuits and is a large part of why I am able to sit before you today. I also thank the rest of my family and friends from all over the country for their support and prayers throughout this process. I am the proud wife of Joe Briggs Sr., who has been instrumental in the process of my career. It was my husband who encouraged me to finally pursue my goals of first becoming an assistant United States attorney and now to seek judicial office. It is also my husband who makes parenting our son, his namesake, Joe Jr., seamless in the face of both of our demanding careers. For that, I want to publicly thank him for his unwavering love and support. Since 2010, I have served as an assistant United States attorney in the District of Columbia. As a dedicated public servant, I have handled a wide range of criminal cases on behalf of the United States and have served under 3 presidential administrations. Prior to joining the Department of Justice, I worked for 8 years as a civil litigator representing both plaintiffs and defendants in complex civil litigation matters. All of my legal experience, appearing in both federal and state courts and handling both criminal and civil cases, has prepared me to serve as a judge. It is my most fervent hope to continue my service to the District of Columbia by becoming an associate judge of the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. I thank you for your consideration of my nomination, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Well, thank you, Ms. Briggs. I'd like to welcome Judge Arthur. Judge Arthur, you may proceed with your opening remarks.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Chairman Peters, Ranking Member Portman, and members of the committee, I'm both honored and humbled to appear before you today as you consider my nomination to be an associate judge of the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. I would like to thank the committee staff for all of its hard work and dedication in preparing for this hearing. I'd also like to thank President Joseph R. Biden for nominating me. I thank all of the members of the District of Columbia's Judicial Nomination Commission, specifically its chair, the Honorable Emmett Sullivan, for recommending me to the White House. I also wish to thank Congresswoman Norton for her kind words of introduction today. I'd also like to thank Chief Judge Anita Josie Herring and former Chief Judges Robert Morin and Lee Satterfield for their leadership and guidance. I'm blessed to come from a large, loving, and supporting family, many of whom are watching online. This includes my sisters, Shana Arthur and Justine Jacquez, my brothers-in-law, Antonio Beatty and Justin Jacquez, my nephews, Jeremy and Jacob, and my mother-in-law, Wynell Beatty. My grandparents, John and Nestor Suchan and Priscilla Arthur, are here in spirit as well. I'm thrilled that my parents, Errol and Violet Arthur, are watching from their home not far from here in Washington, D.C. They left their native Guyana over 50 years ago and settled just outside of Washington. And in raising my 2 sisters and me, they instilled in each of us the importance of hard work, family, and community service. It was with their unwavering support and encouragement that I devoted my life to public service. I reserve a special acknowledgement to my partner and biggest cheerleader, the Honorable Sherry Beatty Arthur, my wife. For over 27 years, she has been my rock, and without her, I would not be here. I'm especially proud to be joined by my son, Miles Arthur, a recent graduate of Morehouse College, and my daughter, Layla Arthur, a rising sophomore at Spelman College. Miles and Layla are my greatest accomplishments, and it would be a great joy to watch them in their journeys. It is certainly a great honor to be considered to be an associate judge on the court where I've worked for nearly 25 years. I've been a magistrate judge since 2010, serving in the Family, Criminal, and Domestic Violence divisions, where I presided over thousands of cases in some of the court's highest volume calendars. From 2016 through 2021, I served as the Deputy Presiding Magistrate Judge and the Presiding Magistrate Judge, where I served on the Chief Judge's leadership teams and covered cases in all of the divisions of the court. I began my legal career at the Superior Court serving as the Judicial Law Clerk to the Honorable Mary A. Gooden Terrell. After my clerkship, I served as a staff attorney with the Public Defender Service for the District of Columbia, where I represented juveniles and adults in matters in the Superior Court, the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services, and the United States Parole Commission. I then formed my own law practice where I worked until my appointment to the bench in 2010. I was born in this great city, and this is my home. It has been an honor to serve the citizens of Washington, D.C. throughout my career. I'm humbled by this opportunity, if confirmed, to be an associate judge and to continue to serve my community in the court that I've been a part of for decades. I look forward to answering any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Arthur. Mr. Ross, you may proceed with your opening remarks.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, and members of the committee. It is an honor to be before you today, and I want to thank the members of the committee and the dedicated committee staff as you consider my nomination to be an associate judge of the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. I would like to thank the members of the District of Columbia Judicial Nomination Commission and its chair, the Honorable Emmett Sullivan, for recommending me to the White House and the President for nominating me. I would like to thank Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton for her kind words today. I would like to thank my parents, Gwen Ross, who is here today, and the late Carl Ross, Jr., for teaching me the value of hard work. I would like to thank my siblings, Marsha Ross, who is also here today, and my other siblings who are watching remotely, Della, Cecil, Robbie, Brandon, and Ryan, for keeping me grounded. I would like to thank my in-laws, Pastor Gerald and Wendy LeBlanc, for always leading by example. And I would like to thank my family, friends, and mentors, including the Honorable James Spencer, the Honorable Hannah Locke, the Honorable Rhonda Reed Winston, and the Honorable Rudolph Contreras for their continued guidance and support. I would like to thank the members and staff of the House Ethics Committee, including Chairman Ted Deutsch and Ranking Member Jackie Walorski, for their leadership and allowing me to work alongside them in the committee's pursuit of justice. And most importantly, I would like to thank my incredible wife, Kimberly, who is also here today, for her unrelenting love and support. I am truly blessed to have her by my side. I am a proud third-generation Washingtonian from a family of military service, civil servants, clergy, nurses, and social workers. My parents dedicated their professional careers to government service and their retirement years to caring for children in need by serving as foster parents to over 120 children and opening a treatment foster care agency. My parents taught me from an early age the importance of giving back to the community and living by the principle that to whom much is given, much is required in return. Following in their public service footsteps, I began my legal career clerking for the Honorable James R. Spencer of the Eastern District of Virginia. During my clerkship, I witnessed firsthand the characteristics that make a good judge, such as patience, respect, and impartiality. I went on to work for the law firm of Arnold & Porter here in Washington, D.C., where I learned to handle large and complex legal matters. For 7 years, I served as an assistant United States attorney in the civil division of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia. During my tenure as an AUSA, I represented the United States in more than 100 civil cases in federal, district, and appellate courts. And for the past 5 years, I've had the honor of serving as investigative counsel for the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Ethics, where I've investigated criminal and civil matters and helped prepare those matters for adjudication by the committee. During my time with the Ethics Committee, I've seen firsthand the importance of handling matters without prejudgment, understand the need to move matters expeditiously, and comprehend the importance of ensuring that each individual that comes before the committee receives due process. It would be an honor to now use the tools, techniques, and skills that I've developed throughout my career to serve my fellow residents of the District of Columbia as an associate judge of the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. If confirmed, I will ensure that all litigants are treated fairly, I will faithfully enforce the rule of law, and I'll be steadfast in upholding the Constitution. Thank you for considering my nomination, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. There are three questions that this committee asks of every nominee. I'm going to ask each of you to respond briefly with just a yes or a no. We're going to start with Judge Arthur and move down the dais there. First, is there anything you are aware of in your background that might present a conflict of interest with the duties of the office to which you have been nominated?
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
Second, do you know of anything, personal or otherwise, that would in any way prevent you from fully and honorably discharging the responsibilities of the office to which you have been nominated?
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
And lastly, do you agree without reservation to comply with any request or summons to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of Congress if you are indeed confirmed?
Yes, Senator.
Yes, Senator.
Yes, Senator.
Great, thank you. This first question is addressed to all three of you. The D.C. courts handle a very high volume of cases, and vacancies on both the Superior Court and the Court of Appeals have contributed to this very extensive backlog of cases. So I'm going to ask the three of you this question. I'll start with Ms. Briggs and then Judge Arthur and Mr. Ross. If confirmed, how will you manage your caseload efficiently while also ensuring that each person who comes before you has a meaningful opportunity to be heard?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Serving as a prosecutor for the last 12 years, I have a lot of experience managing a high-volume caseload. Coupling that with my knowledge of the laws in the district and my practice in Superior Court will allow me to quickly get up to speed if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed and assist with the backlog in whatever section that I am assigned to. If I am confirmed, it would always be my goal to make sure all the litigants before me have an opportunity to be heard and understand the proceedings that are taking place while also efficiently moving my docket along.
Judge Arthur?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I've been a judge for nearly 11 years, and in that capacity, I have presided over thousands of cases. My approach to each one of my cases is to be fully informed about the issues and the evidence in each case. When I prepare, I make sure that I'm fully prepared for any anticipated arguments in the case. And when we're in court, I give each party an opportunity to state their case and make their arguments, and ultimately I make my decision in an efficient manner. Thank you.
Mr. Ross?
Thank you, Senator. I would draw upon my experience dealing with high-volume cases, both as an AUSA and as a clerk for the Eastern District of Virginia. If confirmed, I would ensure that the litigants that come before me are prepared. I would assure that the court is always prepared for the cases that come before it, and I will work to efficiently to move the cases to the court's docket.
Thank you. Ms. Briggs, what challenges do you anticipate facing as you shift from your role as an advocate to the role of an impartial adjudicator, and how are you preparing to make this transition if confirmed?
Thank you, Senator. The roles are different. An advocate starts out with a position that they must advocate on behalf of their clients or their employer. A judge must be neutral. It must listen to the facts, hear the parties, and understand the law. Serving as a senior assistant United States attorney in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, I have had some experience in bringing in cases and being able to research and understand the law as it applies to the case that I'm reviewing coming into the office and making decisions on what, if any, charges will be filed. So I think I've had experience doing some of the things that I will be required to do if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed as an associate judge.
This question will be addressed to all three of you as well. This time we'll start with Mr. Ross and then work that way across to give everybody a chance to be first up and last. This question, again, to all three of you. In your view, what is the proper temperament of a judge? Throughout your career, you have certainly developed the necessary elements of an appropriate judicial temperament. Have you, or at least give us examples of how that has occurred over your career? Mr. Ross, we'll start with you and then go to Ms. Briggs and Judge Arthur.
Thank you, Senator. I believe it's important for judges to be patient in dealing with the litigants that come before them and to be objective in applying the law to the facts. I had the good fortune of clerking in the Eastern District of Virginia for the Honorable James R. Spencer. He exhibited those characteristics each and every day, and I believe those are the important characteristics for a judge.
I agree with Mr. Ross. I would add dedication. My mentor, retired Florida Supreme Court Justice Peggy Quince. I was one of her first summer law clerks after she had been appointed to the Florida Supreme Court, and watching her and speaking with her about the dedication that it takes to understanding the law so that when the parties are before you, you have the knowledge base and you can listen to the parties fairly and then apply that law to what you have gathered in the fact-finding and listening to the parties. Thank you.
I agree with my co-nominees. I've sat on the court for nearly 10 years, and I've presided over thousands of cases again. I've also sat in the courts, many of the court's high-volume calendars. I find that in terms of temperament, it's important that each judge gives his or her full time and attention to each case, and again, give each party an opportunity to be heard in court to state their claims before the court. The court cannot be, and it is my view, that the court cannot exercise or exhibit any emotion when making decisions. The cases are limited to just the facts before it and the applicable law.
Very good. One last question for the three of you, and this time we'll start with Judge Arthur and move across. I certainly appreciate the strong commitment that each of you has made to follow the facts and the laws you've expressed in the previous question when you decide cases before you. But in practice, I want to know, how will you ensure that any personal biases or sympathies that you have, which we all have those innate to us, and how will you ensure that they don't impact the decisions that you make on the bench? Judge Arthur.
Simply stated, Senator, my personal views do not impact any decisions that I make on the bench.
Ms. Briggs.
I agree with Judge Arthur. I would add that each case must be determined by the applicable law, the facts in front of the judge, and applying that law to the facts. My personal beliefs have no place in the courtroom.
Mr. Ross.
I agree with my co-nominees that your personal beliefs have no place in the courtroom. Judges must be cognizant of the fact that they have to set their personal beliefs aside and apply the law objectively to the facts that are before it. I've had the good fortune, when I've worked at the Committee on Ethics, of engaging in that exercise of looking at facts objectively and preparing them for adjudication.
Thank you. Ranking Member Portman is recognized for his questions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Mr. Ross said that judicial temperament is, in large part, patience. And Judge Arthur, the young man behind you, has clearly learned patience. I think he has judicial temperament. Is he with you?
He is.
Would you like to introduce him?
That's my son, Miles Arthur. Oh, hold on. Is that, which
Well,
one were you?
Miles is being pretty patient too, but I'm more impressed with the young guy.
I'm sorry about that. Miles will always be my baby, but he's not.
Yeah.
So.
Well, who's the other young man?
The young guy belongs to me. That's my 6-year-old son, Joe Jr.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Briggs. I didn't realize that was yours. Okay, good. Well, that just woke him up. I'm sorry about that. But seriously, great patience. So we talked about violent crime earlier, and it's a huge problem around our country right now, and it's making so many communities unsafe and hurting the residents of some of our poorest communities and small businesses and others. D.C., unfortunately, is experiencing that surge as well. Homicides, armed robberies are on the rise. I talked earlier about the number of armed robberies this year compared to last year. It's shocking. I think reducing crime has to be a top priority of our judicial system all the way through. For all the witnesses, quickly, what do you think the court's role is in reducing crime, and how can the D.C. court system do a better job to prevent this crime wave from continuing to grow? Maybe start with Mr. Ross.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Senator. The best thing that D.C. courts can do to address crime is address the backlog of cases that are before it. The courts have limited authority, and that authority is limited to the cases and controversies that come before it. It does have the power to address the backlog of cases, move their docket efficiently, and ensure that the victims of crime receive timely justice.
Okay. Ms. Briggs?
Thank you, Senator. I agree with Mr. Ross. I think the timely adjudication of cases and addressing the court's backlog will assist in the endeavor of trying to conquer the crime problem here in the district. Thank you.
Judge Arthur.
I agree with my co-nominees, Senator. I would just add that the timely resolution of the cases is essential because it does address issues of uncertainty for the defendants. It does ensure resolution of cases for complaining witnesses and victims in the community, and also it affects the public's confidence in the court system. So addressing the backlog and addressing the cases in a timely fashion is essential.
Mayor Bowser has criticized the backlog. She said it is a public safety concern, so I don't disagree with what any of you said, but it's also about how the case is ultimately resolved, right? In other words, the decisions that you will make with regard to cases, with regard to saying to those habitual criminals, you know, you can't keep doing this. There's going to be a consequence. Do you agree with that? Mr. Ross?
Yes, the court in all of its cases has to look at the facts before it objectively, and in the issue of crime, there are certain factors that the court must look at when, say, carrying out sentencing, and the court must stick to those factors when issuing its sentencing.
Ms. Briggs?
I agree with my co-nominee.
Mr. Arthur?
I agree with my co-nominees. The court must, however, must make its decisions based solely on the facts and the law, Senator.
Let me ask you a little, if I could, Mr. Arthur, about your background. You've been a magistrate judge in the D.C. Superior Court for more than 10 years, but before that, you practiced in a lot of areas of law, including criminal defense. As a judge, you've also served in the criminal division. How do you approach that transition from being an advocate for criminal defendants to being a judge in criminal cases, where your job is to, again, have consequences for those habitual criminals who are causing these crime waves in places like D.C.?
Thank you, Senator. Again, when I was appointed to the bench in 2010, I had been practicing for over 10 years in the District of Columbia, primarily doing criminal defense. In preparation for my appointment, I spoke to my colleagues on the bench, including my mentor, the Honorable Mary A. Gooden Terrell, and went through the process of how to make judicial decisions. It was stressed upon me, not only in my time in preparation for my appointment, but also during my training sessions, preparing to take the bench. That training, in my view, was essential in making decisions and being able to separate the role that I had once as an advocate and now currently as a judge.
Okay. Ms. Briggs, you've been a prosecutor for more than 10 years. You've prosecuted public officials charged with corruption and police charged with civil rights offenses. How would you approach your transition from being a prosecutor to being a judge in criminal cases, including those cases involving alleged wrongdoing by public officials and law enforcement?
My transition would be I would not have additional information before me that I have when I'm prosecuting cases. So the role of a judge is to understand the law, gather the facts, and hear from the parties before it. And so that's what my focus would be. And then I would apply the law to the facts that have been gathered and make sure that I issue well thought out opinions and rulings. Thank you.
In terms of personal views and politics, in your disclosure, you have to reveal your contributions, and Ms. Briggs, you've donated to political candidates of one party in the past. Will you commit to setting aside your partisan or personal views as a judge?
Thank you, Senator. Absolutely. Those are personal expressions. I will be governed by the Code of Judicial Conduct if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed that has limitations on what political activity I can be involved in, and I will be bound by those rules. Thank you.
Mr. Ross, your legal experience involves civil cases and cases in federal court. Hearing criminal cases is different, and it's even different than the work you're doing now in the Ethics Committee, although I understand you've looked at allegations that would be criminal as well as violating our rules here in the House and Senate. How would you prepare to hear criminal cases and to be a judge and what in your background qualifies you to take on the criminal cases?
Thank you for the question, Senator. In terms of what in my background qualifies me to handle criminal cases, as you mentioned, in my current position, I investigate matters that are both civil and criminal in nature and help prepare those matters for adjudication for the House Ethics Committee. With respect to the transition to actually being a judge, it would be important to get up to speed on both the criminal code here in D.C., the rules regarding criminal procedure here in D.C., and ensure that I can view every case that comes before me objectively with a nuanced understanding of the law and apply the law even-handedly in all of those matters.
Thanks to all three of you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Portman. Senator Hawley, you're recognized for your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to the nominees. Thank you for being here. Let me start with you, Mr. Ross, if I could. You were, a few years ago, you were counsel for some years at Arnold and Porter. Is that right? Do I have that right?
Yes, that's correct,
Yeah.
Senator.
I just want to ask you about some of what you did there. I understand you represented a number of large pharmaceutical companies in your time there as an associate. Have I got that right?
That's correct.
Can you describe the nature of that representation? Let me just ask you a little more specifically. Did any of the work concern opioids?
No, Senator, none of the work concerned opioids.
Well, what about patent infringement?
No, Senator, none of the work involved patent infringement.
Can you give us an overview of the sort of matters that you did handle in that vein?
Yes, Senator. With respect to my time at Arnold and Porter, and it was some years ago, the pharmaceutical defense work that I did was primarily tort liability and tort liability with respect to specific products.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you. That's very helpful. Judge Arthur, if I could come to you, I want to ask you about a case that you had a few years ago, back in 2017, end of 2017. It's a petition of J.O. This was an adoption petition where the D.C. Court of Appeals held that you erred in granting the adoption petition because the birth mother wasn't competent to designate a preferred caregiver under D.C. law. Do you remember this case at all? I mean, it has been several years ago.
It has been several years. I do remember the decision, yes.
Let me give you a few of the facts, and then if you can't remember enough, because I realize some time has elapsed, then I can give some of this to you for the record, because I don't want to catch you off guard here. And my purpose in asking you this is a case where you were reversed. You've been a judge for a number of years. Anybody who sits on the court for any length of time is going to be reversed. So I'm not trying to catch you out here. What I'm more interested in is just trying to understand how you think, and then also, as currently a magistrate judge, how you deal with getting reversed, what you take from that, how you apply those lessons. So that's what I'm after here. So in this case, the court held that given the birth mother's mental history, her mental health history, that she was not in a position to make a determination about what was in her child's best interest. You had recommended that the birth mother's determination about a preferred caregiver be allowed to stand. That's what the D.C. Court of Appeals reversed. The opinion said the child's biological mother had a history of mental health problems. She was admitted to inpatient psychiatric care at the hospital, where she remained hospitalized for a number of weeks after giving birth. She had long medical and mental health history, which is tragic. She'd suffered a serious brain injury at 19, had a history of substance abuse, and so on and so on. Her sister testified that the mother would wander about in New York and D.C. and Virginia. She was mentally ill. She was frequently homeless. This is a sad story and often appeared delusional. So it was a long opinion. It was about 45 pages, which is a pretty lengthy opinion for the highest court of the District of Columbia. And I just want to the extent you remember it, I'm just curious about what you took from this case, and maybe more generally, being reversed, what lessons do you draw from that, and then how do you apply those going forward?
Thank you for the question, Senator. It has been some years since that decision was made. I do recall many of the facts of the case. I, however, have to admit that I don't know what the status of the case is, given that it did involve a related matter, so it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on the specifics of the case as a sitting judicial officer and as a nominee. In terms of making my decision, what I did do is I did paid close attention to the evidence in the case and the facts of the case in rendering my decision, and I applied what I believed to be at the time the appropriate standard in assessing the birth parent's choice of caregiver. As it relates to how I handle or how I would react to the Court of Appeals decision, I would honor it moving forward. It's good law, Senator.
Very good. Let me ask you, just from your experience serving as a magistrate judge, as you have presided over your docket for some years now, are there any particular problems that you have noticed within the D.C. judicial system that from your vantage point, that you think you're able to speak to?
As a sitting judge, it's not appropriate for me to speak on certain issues. I will say, which was alluded to earlier in the questions and in our responses, that the backlog created by COVID-19 and the judicial vacancies is a primary issue for the court, and it must remain as a priority.
Are there any other steps or reforms that you'd like to see in the D.C. court system based on your experience that you think would help justice be better administered here in the district?
Sorry.
No, sorry.
As a sitting judge and as a nominee, it's not appropriate for me to comment on or to answer that question.
But the backlog issue is one that you've addressed. Do you feel strongly about that, it sounds like?
The backlog is an issue. I deal with the cases every day, and our judges make it a priority to address the backlog in cases. Our court is expanding its operations, and we are making headway in addressing the backlog.
Very good. Let me ask you each about criminal penalties. Senator Portman touched on this, which I think is a very, very important topic, given the terrible rise in violent crime, unfortunately crime of all kinds, but especially violent crime that we're seeing all over the country, and that includes here in the district. I'd like to know from each of you, are there any criminal penalties that you feel you would have trouble applying as a judge? Any penalties to which you have a policy objection or policy concerns? Let's just go right down the line. I guess we'll start with you, Judge.
Again, as a sitting judge and as a nominee, it's not appropriate for me to answer that question.
Well, so the answer is not no?
Pardon me?
The answer is not it's a maybe?
Again, I can't comment on me and my views on sentencing.
So what you're telling me is you might have some concerns about, you might have some policy objections, but you're not going to tell me what they are?
No, that's not what I'm saying. My personal views don't factor in to any decision I make regarding sentencing. I am bound to assess the facts of the case in the applicable law, and in sentencing, I would consider any statutory maximums or minimums in the case.
Okay, what about you, Ms. Briggs?
No, Senator.
What about areas of law that may be over-criminalized in your view? Are there any areas of law that you think are over-criminalized? Ms. Briggs, I haven't given you a chance to go first, so and you're a federal prosecutor now, so let me ask you first.
No, Senator.
Mr. Ross?
No, Senator.
Judge?
No, Senator.
Okay. My time's expired, and I think there are probably others. Yeah, Senator Carper's here waiting to question. So I will, for the record, Ms. Briggs, since I didn't get to visit much with you, I want to ask you a little bit about your experience as a federal prosecutor, including applying the guidelines. I realize you wouldn't be dealing with the federal guidelines in this new role, but you have dealt with them for a number of years now. I think that's very important. So I'm going to ask you some questions about that. And Judge, I may give you another question or two about that case we were discussing more specifically to jog your memory. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hawley. Senator Carper, you're recognized for your questions.
Thanks, Mr. Thank you, Senator Hawley. Welcome. I think I had an opportunity to meet all of you, talked about your names, where they came from, a little bit about your family history, and we're honored to be here holding this hearing and considering your nomination. I was elected governor. I'd been a naval officer in the Vietnam War, and later on moved to Delaware, got to be the treasurer, congressman, and governor. And before I was sworn in as governor, I'd been elected before I was sworn in, I was visited by a former governor, Bert Carville, and who had been governor for 8 years earlier in our state's history. And he came to give me some advice. And he said, the state of Delaware, the judiciary is incredibly important. Supreme Court, Court of Chancery, Superior Court, other courts. He said it's sort of like we punch above our weight when it comes to the judiciary in the state of Delaware. And he said, as governor, you get to nominate people to serve in these capacities. Don't screw it up. And I worked for 8 years to try to identify the very best people we could find to run as, not to run, but to be nominated and be hopefully confirmed. And in those 8 years, everyone I ever nominated was confirmed and went on to serve, I think, with just real distinction. This is really important. We had a situation, we had a split legislature, Democrat and Republican, Democratic majority in Senate, Republican majority in the House. But we actually worked together to get people confirmed and to do the best that we could. And I approach this hearing today as I do many things as a recovering governor. And I just wanted to mention that. The average time it takes, Mr. Chairman and colleagues, to fill a vacancy on the D.C. Superior Court, which you've all been nominated to serve in, is over 3 years, over 3 years. If we'd done that in the state of Delaware, we should have all been thrown out of office. It's just appalling. Justice denied, justice delayed is justice denied. But what's more, the Superior Court here in the District of Columbia has among the highest case filings per capita in the U.S., I'm told. With 83,000 case filings in 2019 alone. And so not only is the court struggling with vacancies, it's also confronting a substantial workload. These needlessly lengthy judicial vacancies have burdened the D.C. Circuit Court and the Court of Appeals, delaying justice for our fellow Americans. And as I often said, and I'll say it again, justice delayed is justice denied. The nearly 700,000 Americans who live in D.C. pay taxes. They serve our country, many times in uniform. They start businesses, they care for their neighbors, their friends, and colleagues just like the rest of us. And yet they are not treated like every other American from our 50 states. Congress approves their budget. They have a better credit rating than we do, and we have to approve their budget. We confirm their judges, and we subject them to a higher federal per capita income tax rate than any other the 50 states. And to make matters worse, we in Congress take our time when it comes to accomplishing these tasks. Toward that end, I'm glad that we're considering these nominees today, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, including my fellow former governors. We have some recovering governors on this panel along with me. They include Senator Hassan, Senator Scott of Florida. I want to resolve the issues of these judicial vacancies. And with that, I thank you for the chance to offer those comments. I have a question, at least one question that I'd like for us to get to. Again, when I served as governor of Delaware, it was my responsibility to nominate individuals to serve on our state's highly regarded courts, Court of Chancery, Supreme Court, and others. And considering potential candidates, I looked for the following 5 attributes: sound moral character, a complete knowledge of the law, a willingness to listen to both sides of an argument, good judicial temperament, and the ability to make difficult decisions with sound reasoning within a reasonable period of time. Could each of you please take maybe a minute apiece to discuss the importance of having these attributes as a judge and how, if confirmed, you would bring these qualities to the District of Columbia's Superior Court as an associate judge? Mr. Arnold, please. Is it Carol? Arthur, Mr. Yes. Arthur, I can barely see your name tag. There we go. All right, take it away, please.
Thank you, Senator. You characterized the standard for which I try to hold myself to every day that I appear in court. Again, I've been a judge now for nearly 11 years.
So I should address you as judge, Arthur. You're not just, this is not your first rodeo.
It works. I will say, again, every day that I enter my courtroom, I make sure that I ensure that every person is heard, that every case is addressed, and that I make fair and efficient decisions.
Good, thank you. I think the default here is for your work, and if you're confirmed for this post, the default here is golden rule. Trying to figure out what to do, treat other people the way you want to be treated. I think that always works. Ms. Briggs.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Those standards you listed are embodied in what I think the role of a judge is. And if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, I will make sure that I understand the law, that I gather the facts, and that I fairly hear from the litigants, and then apply that law to the facts in making any rulings and decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Ross.
Thank you, Senator. I also agree that the characteristics that you described embody what I hope to be as a judge if confirmed. Impartial, ensuring that I treat all litigants equally that come before the court, moving the court's docket efficiently, and making sure that any opinions that are issued are clear and concise.
Good. Before the hearing began, we had a chance to talk a little bit. Your middle name is Ezekiel, and I mentioned I've been reading through the Old Testament and came across Ezekiel quite a bit. And you're named after him, I believe. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Can you think of any qualities that Ezekiel demonstrated that you might want to embrace as a member of the bench here in the District of Columbia? Anything come to mind?
Patience, Senator.
All right. To that, I'll just say amen. All right. Have one other question. I'm going to ask the other question for the record, if I could, and just ask all of you just to respond for the record. Is that all right, Mr. Chairman? Oh, yeah, good. Still want you to respond, but we'll just ask you to respond for the record, and I can get back to my other hearing that I'm supposed to be at. In looking over your biographies and looking through your opening statements, I noticed that you all have a strong connection to the District of Columbia, whether through your personal life or your professional life. And I admire your desire to take on these roles and continue giving back to this community through public service. The job of an associate judge on the D.C. Superior Court is no small task, given the backlog and the extended judicial vacancy the court is currently facing. The question I'm going to ask you to answer on for the record is this. Could each of you take some time to share with us in writing why you want to take on the role of D.C. Superior Court judge and how you will use your service to ensure that your fellow Americans are expeditiously and justly granted their day in court? And I'll ask you to do that for the record. In the meantime, from what I can tell, what my staff tells me, you're ideally well-suited for these roles. And we're grateful to you for your willingness to serve. Grateful to your families for their willingness to share you with the folks of the District of Columbia. All right, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Carper. As we get ready to wrap up this hearing, I just have one final question for each of you to answer. From the testimony you've given here today, it's clear that you're all very talented individuals with great professional accomplishments and have a wealth of experience. And when you have all of those things, you have a lot of options in life, and there are a lot of options for you in the private sector that potentially could be more lucrative than the position that you are seeking right now, and yet each of you have decided to pursue public service. So I want to know, and the committee would like to know, what is it about public service that attracts you to this position, and why have you decided to focus on that in seeking this position? I'll start with you, Ms. Briggs, and then we'll go to Mr. Ross and finish up with Judge Arthur.
Thank you, Senator. I've had a long time interest in serving as a judicial officer, and as I mentioned earlier, I've been a dedicated public servant at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia for the past 12 years. It would be an honor to continue that service as an associate judge with the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. But that long-time interest was sparked when I walked into the office of retired Florida Supreme Court Justice Peggy Quince and got to see someone that looks like me in a judicial robe, and I knew from that moment on that I wanted to follow in her footsteps. Thank you.
Mr. Ross?
Thank you, Senator. I'm simply following in the example that my parents set forth. My parents chose public service throughout their careers. They led by example each and every day. And from a very early age, I understood the importance of giving back to the community. I've had the good fortune of serving in public service in all three branches of the government. I've developed a certain number of skill sets over the course of my career, and I would like to now use the skills and experience that I've developed throughout my career to serve my fellow residents of the District of Columbia.
Very good. Judge Arthur.
Thank you, Senator. Again, as I alluded to in my opening statement, my parents served as the foundation for me, and they encouraged me to pursue a career in public service. I've been blessed throughout my life to be surrounded by individuals who supported and encouraged me to pursue that. Like my colleagues, I had the good graces of working for the Honorable Mary A. Gooden Terrell, who encouraged me, even after my clerkship, to consider the bench. I've had the good fortune of working in one of the best trial courts in America. That's the D.C. Superior Court. I've served there for 11 years, and I can honestly, nearly 11 years. It will be 11 years in August. And I can honestly say that every day that I go into court, I learn something new. I enjoy the work that I do, and I look forward, if confirmed, to being an associate judge at the Superior Court.
Thank you, Judge Arthur. And thank you to the three of you for being here before us here today, and congratulations to the three of you on your nomination and your willingness to take on these very challenging positions before you. The nominees have filed responses to biographical and financial questionnaires, and without objection, this information is going to be made part of the hearing record, with the exception of the financial data, which is on file and available for public inspection in the committee offices. The hearing record will remain open until 12 p.m. tomorrow, July 13th, for the submission of statements and questions for the record. This hearing is now adjourned.